feels younger can go with Carrie. Carrie, can you wave so they can see you? And Nick back there, they have a really cool program. Of course, if you feel more comfortable being here and listening to me, you can also stay here. I would recommend going to the kids program. Because Carrie's cool. Nick too. Carrie's cool. Awesome. Good morning. It's so good to see you all. And it's weird because it's the first time I feel kind of nervous standing up on stage because I haven't spoken in English for that long. Like, just everything in German for 3 months, and now coming back, suddenly in English, suddenly standing in front of the people, some new faces, some old faces, and it's really cool. Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for being here and celebrating the service with us together today. And we are in a series called Who Am I? And the big question is, who are we according to what God says? And I love that in that song that we just sang, it's the I am who you say I am. And so the big question of the series is not just how do I define myself or how do I figure out who I really am, but it's the how do I find out who God says I am? And how can I live according to what God says, who I am, who you are, and what our identity is in Him. And so it's actually the third series after having a series about who is Jesus, then who is God, with the names of God, and now who are we, because we can only know who we are in light of who God is. He created us in His image, and so we want to go into that. And today we come to the second part. Last week we talked about we are made for relationship with God. We are the counterpart to God, and He loves us, and that's the very first thing why we even exist. And today we come to a second point, and Jasmine already said it. There's a word that is thrown around that's called disciple. And disciple is an interesting word because Jesus actually, according to my quick research, Jesus never says, you are my disciples. It somehow it's implied in things. Jesus comes when he turns 30, he starts his ministry, and he goes up to people and says, follow me. And these people get up and follow him. What does that mean? That means they had an implication in their mind. They knew that this means more than just walk around with me and let's see what comes out. Because in that culture, it was a culture where the rabbis were teachers calling students to follow them as disciples, as apprentices, to walk with them through life and learn from them and become more like them, so that the good things that these teachers have to bring are brought to the community around them. So they're basically educating them, they're teaching them, they're training them, and the disciple is not just a follower as we have nowadays. I read a book a few years ago where it was like, are you a fan or a follower? And it was like, are you just cheering for God or are you following Him? Nowadays I feel like if you say fan, it's almost means more than follower with social media. With follower, you just click a I like it button. But Jesus is not calling for I like it buttons. He's not calling for followers that say, I'm with you, let's just cheer more. The last days, I think Toronto was very much impacted by Taylor Swift being here. There were many, many followers, many fans. And they're loud and they're crying and they're cheering. But is that what Jesus is calling us to? And I have a little disclaimer with a little apology beforehand with the topic today. If nobody ever told you about what we're talking about today, I'm sorry. Because this is a huge part of what it means to be a Christian. And if you look at people like me, and you think, okay, that person is not really that 100% as Jesus wanted them to be, we're all fighting a battle here, and last week we heard that faith means to let go. And I think it's an ongoing thing, and nobody of us is perfect in that, and that's why Jesus sets the bar pretty high, and that's what we want to read now. Okay, so we need our Bibles. Very important. I went to 15 different church services, 13 that I did myself, but 15 different church services, and none of the churches had Bibles on their chairs, and I was like, I miss my Bibles. And some churches I went to, and I said, can you put Bibles on the chairs? And they said, we don't have any Bibles in the building. Like, what's happening? We need our Bibles. We are here to learn to read the Bible together because we believe, and that's one of our main values, the open Bible, that the Word of God, the Bible, is where we get to know God. That's the story that God wrote with His people and with us. And if we want to know who God is and what He wants to have for our lives, we need to open our Bibles. So, please take a pen. If you have your phone, that is fine. Read as you would read every day. And we're opening Luke chapter 14. So the bigger Bible passage here. Luke is one of the Gospels, so one of the 4 books that talks about the story of Jesus in the New Testament. So it's a little bit further back. And it's the 3rd out of the 4. And then we have the big number, the 14, that's the chapter. So if we say Luke chapter 14, it's the big number. And we read the verses 25 to 35. So the small numbers are the verses 25 to 35. If you have the brown Bible that was on the chairs, we're on page 889. 98, thank you. See, told you, too much German in my head. They say it the other way around. Right. Luke chapter 14, big number 14, verses small number 25 to 35. That's our passage for today. We want to read that together, so if everybody has the Bible open, read along. Can I ask one person to read it out loud for us? Someone else, Francesca, you always read. Sorry. Read that.
Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear."
Thank you so much. Wow, that's quite some words that Jesus brings here. He's very direct, he's very clear in these words. And I think for purpose. But first, something I love about Jesus is that he uses images. He uses these beautiful pictures to explain things. And we have 2 good pictures here about the counting the cost. What are those 2 pictures?
The builder.
The builder. So if a person builds a building, huge thing in Germany, every person our age that we talked to was talking about building a house now, which, and they have to save money, and they have to figure out how this works. They have to count the cost, calculate how much they can do before they start building, because otherwise they run out of money, and the thing never ends. Will never be finished. And that actually happens through history quite often, that someone started building something. Here in Toronto, for example, Casa Loma is one of the good examples where someone ran out of money and it was never finished. There's still things unfinished in that huge building. What's the other image that Jesus brings? A king. So a king that goes to war has to figure out, okay, how many soldiers do I have? How much food do I have? Because I cannot just send the soldiers without any equipment or food and everything to fight a war. And if I don't have enough, I should better work for peace in other ways. And then go and figure it out in a different way. But Jesus clearly says, we need to learn to calculate, to count costs. We have to be wise. God has given us a brain that works, intelligence, logic, mathematics. Use it for your whole life. Wherever you are, you have to figure out, is it worth doing this next step? Is it worth making this decision? Is it worth going into this? Can I finish what I start? Can I go the whole way? Can I persevere till the end? And now Jesus is using all of that for discipleship. And he lists that there's cost of discipleship. And that's why I said, like, sorry if nobody ever told you that, because I think quite often we come around with, there's good news, Jesus died for you, do you want to believe this? And then everything's going to be good. But there's more to it. There's actually, it starts with good news that God created you and loves you and has a purpose for your life. Then there's bad news, and the bad news is God is holy, you're not. And then there's great news, that is that Jesus died for you, so that this gap between His holiness and your sinfulness can be bridged, thanks to Jesus. And then there's the follow-up news, that walking with Jesus is a walk like Jesus. And He says Himself, take your cross upon you. And sets an example that's quite extreme. So maybe we have to do a real calculation. That's why I brought my lovely whiteboards. I love my whiteboards. Just that you're aware of that. So let's just do one on this side with the cost. So look back into your text, verses 25 to 35. What does Jesus say are the costs of discipleship, of following Him? And just say it out loud. In Germany, I always said we do it the Torontonian way. Whoever is the fastest or the loudest is the one I listen to. So now you have to prove that that was right.
It's something like family, but I'm not sure exactly. Hating your family doesn't sound quite right.
Do you have a good explanation what it could mean? I'm going to write hate in family, but...
Being willing to be apart from your family, I guess. Oh yeah, Jesus above your family.
So there's a Jesus above your family. There's a really good point. Like Jesus literally says, hate your family. Which sounds really harsh. So am I supposed to dislike my family? Am I supposed to say, I don't talk to you guys anymore? But we have more examples throughout the Bible where the word hate, in contrast to the word love, means to account as less, to make it less of a priority, to put it back behind you and not in front of you. And if we look into the rest of the Bible, there's quite a few moments where the Old Testament says, honor father and mother. And Jesus repeats it. He doesn't say, don't care about the family anymore. He says, these laws are still important. You should still honor father and mother. But here it's about something else. It's not about disliking them. It's about, would you be willing to put Jesus above your family? And again, coming back to the context, Jesus didn't say, do you want to be my disciple? We're going to have fun together. He said, follow me. And the follow me at that time meant these men at that time mostly had to leave their things and leave their families behind to walk with Jesus away from their homes. So in this case, the hate did literally mean leave behind. And we come back to the awesome definition of faith, to let go of something for the sake of what God gives you. Leave behind not in a way of, I will never talk to you again, but at that moment it really meant you have to leave them where they are so you can follow Jesus. I'm glad that we have technology nowadays and I can talk weekly to my family back in Germany. So I left them behind, but we're still connected. But then we come into other question of prioritizing. How much time do I spend with whom, and who do I spend time with first? Not just in more important ways, but the first thing in the day or before I do something else. Is there a prioritizing question? Because then it's interesting because Jesus says we should hate something else as well in that passage. What is that?
Our own lives.
Our own lives. That sounds quite hard. Hate yourself, hate your own life. Again, I don't think Jesus says dislike yourself. Look into the mirror and say, oh, look at you. The opposite. Jesus also says, what's the most important law? to love God, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love anybody else. That's coming together in Jesus' mind. So if he says, hate yourself, same thing. Let go of the idea of who you want to be and ask Jesus who he says you are. Let go of your own plans and take the plans of Jesus. Let Jesus be first. He's very much talking about put yourself second, put Jesus first. Put the family second, put Jesus first. Who sits on the throne of your life? In this case also, if the disciples were called, follow me, some of them were fishermen. They had to stop being fishermen. And they had to be willing, according to how Jesus then says, he says, I'll make you fishers of men, to take the new profession that Jesus gave them. Leave behind who they thought they were, to ask who Jesus says they are. And that's exactly what we want to do with the sermon series as well, right? Like, to take a step back and say, I might know who I am, I always wrestle with it. Let's ask Jesus who he says I am. And put that first before I think about myself and my ways. What else does Jesus say is the cost of following him? Back in the text. Yeah.
Carrying the cross.
Right. Bear your cross. What could that mean? Does somebody have an idea? No.
Following his ways, and you're following his ways.
Right.
That's what the cross means. It was like the burden,
Mhm.
carry the burden.
Right. It's a way
As
of
heavy as it could be.
right humility, a way of counting other people higher than myself, a way of suffering in some ways because I stand with him rather than with what other people want from me. But it's also a way of loving people, giving yourself for the sake of other people. And that's why I think the hate is not an opposite to love, because bearing the cross is actually the greatest symbol of love, what Jesus did. So when Jesus says, hate your family, but bear your cross, and hate would be, don't like your family anymore, bearing your cross actually says, I love my family, I'm going to do everything for them. So that would be a contradiction if the hate actually means despising someone. It means to love them the right way, and the right way means to put Jesus first. And bearing the cross means to go the extra mile, to share your life with people, walk in humility, in dependency on the Father, making the kingdom of God the first priority in what we do. There's one more thing in the whole text about the cost of discipleship. Somebody find it?
Giving up everything you have.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do everything.
That's a symbol I just made up. Give up everything. Give up whatever you have. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm just standing on the street naked. In one point in the Bible, it happened that Jesus said to a rich young man, go sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, and then follow me, to make a clear point. In our case, what does it mean to give up everything we have? Some translations say to renounce. I think we come back to the hate question, to the first ones. It means everything I have is less important than Jesus. Everything I own is less important than God. The things we have are just God's things. I don't see them as my own. I don't build my own kingdom. I don't try to get my own stuff, but I give it up to God and say, God, you do what you want to do with it. With open hands to Him. That's the cost of discipleship. That I don't have the main say in my life anymore, that I don't just have the time management that I want to do, but I ask Jesus, you first, what comes next? My family, Jesus, you first, what comes next? Now, to be fair, I also want to do the other side before we go into the follow-up question, why is Jesus a Red Bull? What are the things that we gain? Because in building a tower, in the end you have a tower. In going to war and you calculate it where you might win, in these big life decisions where we have to count the cost, we want to come out with a benefit, with a reward, with something that was good for it. So I think we should look at that side too, that Jesus doesn't mention much here. He mentions it in one point. But I'm going to get my other whiteboard. You get time to think about it. I have more than two. Yeah. And you can think about what are the rewards of being a disciple of Jesus, and then we have to write that down too. And again, whoever says something first, the loudest.
Ben, do you have a black, like a darker marker? I can't see that color.
So yeah. That one is a great idea.
No, but for the other whiteboard, that's fine. Thank
I'll
you.
try this one over here.
Thank you very much.
Good question, thanks. Is it better? Okay. Otherwise, I take pictures later and send it to you. What would you say? What's the reward of following Jesus?
Salvation.
Mm-hmm. Peace. And first of all, peace in our hearts before it comes to peace with other people, because again, sometimes we have to leave other people behind and they won't understand it. If we say, well, Jesus tells me to do this first, they might not understand, but it is for greater good.
Relationship with God.
Guidance.
Yeah. Guidance. What else? I actually don't think I have one anymore. Sorry.
Purpose.
Purpose. Yes. I'm going to leave it there. You can think about more. But I think those points are super important, especially salvation, purpose, peace. We're not talking just about situations, but we're talking about eternity. We're talking about an eternal reward that comes out of it. So there's costs on the one side. That means, are we willing to put more time into Jesus than into other things? To let Jesus decide of our time? To let Jesus say who we are? Are we willing to give up our own desire to do something, our own plans, our own ways? Are we willing to go the harder way, the longer way, for the sake of people, to love people? Are we willing to say, everything I have is actually God's and He can decide over it? In return for a purposeful life, with peace in our hearts, knowing that as soon as God is in charge, He's the one making the calls. That means He makes good calls, and I'm not responsible. I don't have that pressure of always having to make the right decision, because the right decision I make is holding it to God. The relationship with God, which is actually the greatest benefit ever, as we heard last week. That's what it's all about. We're made for relationship. If we have other things over Jesus, there's more. Then we're making about something else. And yet, looking at these two things, I was wondering, why is Jesus so radical? Why is Jesus so hard about this? Why can we not still say, well, my family is super important, Jesus? Because it is important. Family is super important. Why does He say, put your family last, or not last, but not first? Why does He say, maybe you have to walk away from your family to these disciples? Why does He say, everything you have, count it as nothing, give it up? Why is He so strict about it? We have an answer, because I have three, but what's yours?
I was thinking any reward that would be worth it, it has some kind of cost associated with it.
Has some cost?
No, any reward
Yeah.
that is worth it
Right.
has some cost associated with it.
Right. And my big
If you want to
question
do
is,
something valuable, you have to give up something valuable.
exactly, yeah. My question was, why do we have to give up so much? Why does He make it so extreme? And maybe you don't ask the question, and it's great. I just have another 15 minutes prepared on that part. I was wrestling with that question because honestly, for me, it's not easy to always say God first, or to always be in that mindset of course, there's a reward. I quickly want to make it about my best outcome, or care about family and be like, yeah, family needs to come first. I'm also a very person-oriented person, so that means if there's someone else in the apartment, I will always have the tendency to go to that person, spend time with them. And it's an act of love, and it's a good thing. But according to Jesus, it's not the best thing. And it's easy to become a fan of Jesus and do all the fun events, but Jesus calls to much more. And I think he has good reasons. And here's 3 questions that I thought that were important to me coming out of this comparison, counting the cost. Am I a disciple? Jesus asked me through this text 3 questions. The first one is, what are you missing out on? What are you afraid of missing out on? It's quite interesting that if we look into our text, we don't have enough time to read all of that, but the parable that Jesus tells right before he comes into the passage that we just read is called the parable of the banquet, in verses 12 to 24 in Luke 14. And there Jesus tells a story of a rich man inviting people, and those people are too busy. One says, well, I have to do my work first. The other says, I have to take care of family first. And the other says, I have to do the other thing first. I cannot come to your party. And then that man sends out his servants and say, if my friends don't want to come, get anybody on the streets and bring them to me, and we're going to have a great celebration. And Jesus takes that as an example, as a warning, to say, if you're too busy with other things, you might be missing out on the most important things. If you have this, I can do this later mentality, you might be missing out on something that is important now. It's also the same in a relationship, in a marriage, like with Julia and me. If I was always to put Julia last and do things with other people first, well, of course, eventually she would start to build a life without me. Have other friends, do things with other people, and not plan with me anymore. And God says, if you start living your life always without God, other things are more important, other things have to come first. Eventually you miss the point of the invitation that God says, live with me, be my disciple, follow me. But Jesus says that. What are the other things that make you miss out on the presence of God? And we are limited in our time, and we are limited in our capacity, and we have to make priorities.
Distractions.
Right. They become huge distractions that keep us away from God. And suddenly, God is always the afterthought, the next one. And I think Jesus is so clear about it because the worst thing that can happen to us is that God becomes our afterthought. Because then God becomes a guilt person, not the person of grace. If we live our lives and then always God in the end, then we always feel guilty about not spending time with God, about not listening to God, about not being in the Word of God, about not asking Him. And then the idea of God and who Jesus is becomes a thought of guilt and shame, even though that is exactly what Jesus wanted to take away from us. If we let the distractions take over our life, even if we let family come first, if we let ourselves come first, and Jesus becomes the afterthought, it's not the Jesus that died for us on the cross to take away guilt and shame. And we're going to be missing out on that. The other question was, what are you on earth for? It's quite interesting that there is a passage that we just read that says, it's good to be salt, but salt that loses its saltiness has no worth anymore. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 16, again, not enough time to read it, I'm sorry, you can look it up, write it down. We're in the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus says, you are. Here he says you are. He never says you are the disciples, but he says, you are the salt of the world. And then he says, you are the light of the world. You are the ones that should bring salt, light into this world. You have a mission. And if we're extreme, we have to say, the only reason why Christians are on this earth is because they have a mission. Everything else, to honor God, to become more like Jesus, to worship Him, would be better in His presence in heaven. We will be much better Christians being with Him in heaven. But we are here on earth because we have a mission. Because we're called to be salt and light to the world. Now Jesus says, what if the salt loses its saltiness? And That is a comparison that's hard for us to understand because our salt is always the same. At that time, it could lose its saltiness. But the picture that helped me is the picture of an athlete. What if an athlete stops practicing training? The athlete will become unable to perform. We are called into a mission as disciples of Jesus to be light and salt for the world, to share God's love with the people around us, to share the gospel, the good news of Jesus with people around us. Every moment that we put Jesus second, we lose our saltiness, we lose our strength, we lose our power of our witness to the world, even though that's the only reason why we're here. And I'm saying that even in a harsh way. I know for families it's often hard to, but you have family, but that's the same thing. You have family so that the family you have built can become a family that honors God. Your first call as parents, and I tell that to myself now that we're going to have a baby in February, the first call we have is to be salt and light to our kids. And then the stewardship of everything comes with that. But I also think that comes with my third question, and the third question is, who do you learn from? Because I often hear this question, like, why do I have to put things second if it's good things? Well, take it that way. If an apprentice, someone who wants to learn something, never listen to their master, would it be the best thing possible? My cousin is a chef. He learned how to cook. And he did know how to cook a little bit before he went into his apprenticeship. And apprenticeships are much bigger in Germany. So almost every profession you do an apprenticeship for, that means you work every day, and Fridays you go to school to learn the theory with it. But then you work again. And your master, the one teaching you, that's the most important person throughout these years. And you try to learn everything you can from the master. Now, my cousin wanted to cook for the whole family, and that was great. He made a good meal, a fine meal. In the beginning it was a little interesting. And it was an act of love. But the moment that he spent more time with his master learning how to cook in better ways, the meals he could make for the family were much better meals. And it's the same way here. If we love family first, if we love ourselves first, if we love other things first, they might be good things, and our love might be with a good intention. But couldn't we love much better if we spend time with the one who is love, the personification of love first? Who do we think we are if we just think, I'm going to do the best thing I can out of myself? I'm going to try to love the world. I'm going to try to do it right. I'm going to try to be the best self I am, without asking the one who created you, without spending time with that person, without being shaped by that master, without being trained by that master to do it well, to live life and love people well. I think actually, if you turn it around, we would have to ask, is it really the loving way if you try to do it yourself without Jesus? Are you really loving the people around you if you try to do it out of yourself without spending time with Jesus first to let him teach you how to do it well? So for me, these three questions were really interesting that Jesus spoke into my life. Just like, what are you missing out on? Why do you let yourself be distracted so much? Because in the end, there might be a point where Jesus says, you didn't care about me. You always had me as an afterthought. And the Jesus you know is not the Jesus I am. If we don't seek the kingdom of God and his will intentionally, we might eventually be missing out on it. What are you on earth for? To be salt and light. What can we do to keep up that saltiness? To be in shape to be a good witness? And who do we actually learn from? Are we willing to learn from the one who has mastered life to his death, has mastered love, shown in his death? And then it comes back to this question, who are you? Are you a fan of Jesus? Think it's great what he has done? Are you cheering a cheerleader? Are you clicking that like button? Or did you calculate the cost and say, okay, Jesus calls me to let go of things, to fully follow him, to let him shape me. I want to be a disciple. I want to be a teammate who's on the pitch with him, not just someone sitting back there cheering. I want to be the one that he shapes into the best version I can be for the purpose he has given me. And for that, I cannot just be a fan. For that I have to be a disciple. And let him be the priority. I said it in my disclaimer. I'm sorry if you never heard about these costs. They're part of it because they make us more like Jesus. And I'm sorry if you look at other Christians or at me as a missionary and say, well, but you don't do that. Yeah, we're all learning, and I think it's an ongoing battle to let go and let God. So I would say at this point, let me pray. Jesus, I thank you that you give us good reasons to put you first. You give us the promise of eternity, of your presence, of peace. And we see how easy it is for us to jump back into the doing it ourselves routines, into problem solving ourselves, putting other things first, always trying to get things done, maybe out of good intentions, but Jesus, teach us. First of all, stop us and teach us how to do things better, your way, to be disciples learning from you, to be apprentices, being taught by you as a master, to be followers not like on social media, but walking in your footsteps. Let us become more like you, for your glory and for your kingdom, that we can be salt and light for the world around us. Jesus, I pray that you really work into our hearts, and that you forgive us for every moment that we either didn't calculate the cost, or just went over this too quickly, and weren't serious enough about it. For every moment that we're quick to do it ourselves, please teach us how to let go. Amen. At this point, what we always want to do is we go into small groups to talk about this. I know it's something to hear, but then to process is even better. And maybe I said some stuff that you didn't like or you didn't understand. So use the time in the breakout groups to really wrestle through this and make it applicable. You find the questions on the back of that little bulletin sheet that was on the chairs. So actually it's the front, I just put them the other way around so you see everything first. And we're gonna meet in groups. That means under your chair, there's a little card that either says stage, this is up here, or sanctuary, that's at one table back there. Bible study room is the room across the hallway over there. Or all-purpose room is downstairs. You go downstairs to the right in that big room, not where the kids ministry is. Just meet with the group, introduce yourself for a second, then go through the questions and take the time to talk about it. Also take Bibles with you. There's a Bible passage to read. And then in the end, pray together. We're trying to be done by 12:30 so the kids ministry is done and the parents can pick up the kids. All right. That being said, please stand up and I want to bless you as you go out, so don't run out too quickly. I'm going to speak a blessing over you, and then when you stand, you can get walking right away. Our God, Father in heaven, bless us and give us an understanding of the purpose you have given in our lives. Jesus Christ, bless us as we want to be your students and your disciples. Holy Spirit, bless us with your teaching, your correcting, and with your joy, that all of it is for a very good reason,